When it comes to smartphone naming schemes, it's best not to think about them too hard, and that's probably never been more true than with Realme's new mid-ranger, the Realme GT Master. What can we expect from the Master? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our full review. The Realme GT Master is a mid-range phone that aims to take on some of those shiny flagship killers we've seen lately. It brings a similar design to the high-end Realme GT Explorer Master, but with some toned-down specs. Both the GT Master and Explorer Master were designed by Naoto Fukusawa, and his concept was based on the appearance of luggage, for the travelers at heart. It's a faux leather design with 3D accents and his own signature. But if you're not into that, there's the option for the more minimalistic Luna White, which we have here. It's a matte finish that doesn't pick up fingerprints that easily. The rear panel and glossy frames seem to be plastic, and the phone feels comfy in hand. On the front of the Master is a 6.43-inch AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a punch hole for the selfie cam, and a fast 120Hz refresh rate. The high refresh rate smooths out your swiping and scrolling, and it will also adapt to what's going on the screen to save energy. If you stop interacting with the UI, for example, it'll dial down to 60Hz, and the default for games is 60Hz as well. This display is quite nice. Thanks to OLED technology, blacks are super deep, and the picture is plenty sharp at 409 ppi. Colors aren't the most accurate out of the box, but there are plenty of color settings to tweak them with. And although there's no official HDR10 support in the specs, we did get HDR playback in YouTube at least. As far as brightness goes, it's good enough for legibility outdoors, but not class-leading. We measured around 440 nits maximum with the manual slider, which boosts to around 640 nits in auto mode when in bright conditions. And there's an optical fingerprint scanner sitting under the display for your biometrics. It's quite fast and reliable to wake up and unlock the phone, even if it is placed a bit lower than we're used to. For audio, the GT Master has a headphone jack and a single speaker at the bottom. This is a bit of a disadvantage compared to other mid-rangers with stereo setups. It's not particularly loud, scoring average on our loudness chart, and sound quality is okay, but nothing special. Storage-wise, you get 128 or 256 gigs on board, and that's it. It isn't expandable. The interface of the GT Master is Realme UI 2.0, based on Android 11. It's the same UI we've seen on other recent Realme phones, heavily customized but still smooth and bloat-free. You have support for an app drawer, or you can opt to keep all of your apps on the home screen. Multimedia is handled by Realme's apps, which include the Photos app, music, and videos, and the file manager is proprietary too. Through the task switcher, you're able to minimize an app into a mini window or a floating window. Great for less intrusive multitasking. Realme UI provides a personalizations panel, which allows you to customize various aspects of the interface, from font styles to the always-on display. And there's a game space for organizing your game titles and managing notifications while playing. Behind all of these features is a Snapdragon 778G chipset built on a 6nm process. CPU-wise, it's actually in the same ballpark as last year's flagships, as well as the Realme GT Explorer Master, which has a Snapdragon 870. Graphics tests are a different story, where it does fall behind the flagships, but is still competitive for the class. You get 5G connectivity, and as far as thermals go, the Master does a good job, with very little thermal throttling in our sustained stress tests. Overall, the performance here is not quite flagship grade, but it's excellent for a mid-ranger, and everyday tasks and games run without a hitch. The Realme GT Master has a 4300 mAh battery, and considering its size, it provides great battery life. The phone was able to score an endurance rating of 114 hours in our proprietary tests. And when it comes to charging speed, it's hard to beat the Master. It comes with a 65-watt Dart charger in the box, and with it is able to charge from 0 to 100% in half an hour. Moving on to the Realme GT Master's triple cameras. There's a 64-megapixel quad Bayer main camera, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide cam, and a 2-megapixel macro cam. During the day, 16-megapixel photos from the main cam are very good. They have an excellent level of detail and balanced sharpening. But the colors are really saturated, and together with the high contrast, you get very vibrant looking photos that may not appeal to everyone. Portraits generally come out good, with fairly competent subject separation and excellent dynamic range. 8-megapixel photos from the ultra-wide are okay. There's good sharpness and the distortion correction works well, but there's also not that much detail and dynamic range is limited, and while the color rendition is likable, it doesn't match the main cams. 2-megapixel photos from the macro cam are far from impressive. Though it's nice to have the option for close-ups, the detail level is limited by the resolution. You also get muted colors and narrow dynamic range, and the fixed focus makes shooting a chore. In low light, photos from the main cam aren't great. They're soft and noisy, and dynamic range is limited. At least the colors are saturated enough. Turning on night mode makes a dramatic difference in quality. Detail is improved throughout the frame, and the highlights and shadows in particular are much more developed. We did notice one flaw with the processing though. Moving cars often end up surrounded by bright blobs. The ultra-wide cam's low-light photos are poor in quality. They're soft, dark, and underexposed, with blown highlights. There is support for night mode on the ultra-wide, and these photos are much better. They have superior sharpness and detail, and the exposure and dynamic range are vastly improved. Selfies are taken with the 32-megapixel front-facing cam, and they are very good, with excellent detail, wide dynamic range, and pleasing colors. The file size is rather large though because of the high resolution. Videos from the main cam can be recorded in up to 4K resolution at 30 FPS. The colors and contrast are good, but you don't get a lot of detail, and the over-sharpening is pretty excessive. The ultra-wide cam can record 1080p video, and it's decent. You get a good amount of detail for the resolution, but the colors and exposure are different from the main cams. There's support for electronic stabilization, but it's not the best we've seen. It smooths out handshake and pans, but if you're walking, the footage will still be wobbly. There is an ultra steady mode though, which will iron out even the walking, but it's limited to 1080p resolution. So that's the Realme GT Master. You get a nice looking design, which is quite unique if you opt for the suitcase variant. The high refresh rate AMOLED display is pretty nice, and on top of that, you get a powerful mid-range chipset, great battery life, and chart-topping charging speed. Plus, the cameras do a good job, at least when it comes to taking stills. There's not a ton of things to complain about here, but in such a competitive price bracket, they're worth mentioning. You don't get stereo speakers, and the video capture isn't great. And if you shop around, you can find rivals with waterproofing or expandable storage. But still, the GT Master does a lot of things right, and if you're looking for a feature-packed mid-ranger, it deserves a recommendation. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.